cloud. Okay, good. So yeah, we can get started. And so the reason that we wanted to interview you was to talk about social media and how that can help connect people to the archives, because that's sort of the focus that we chose for this year's CoRSAL meeting. Since now everyone's online, then it seemed like a good year for people to share their experiences with. But so this is something that you had been doing for kind of a while, and even not really spurred just by COVID, but you had been using social media a lot beforehand. So yeah, so I think we could just start out if you wanted to kind of describe how you use social media and what sort of your approach is in terms of like work stuff.
In terms of work, of course, yes. So primarily, I do use social media for work. You know, once in a while. So I got onto Facebook probably, maybe close to 10 years ago, but it took a while to start using it in a way that was interesting from a work perspective. And look, I do occasionally put up posts about things that are not related to work. So, you know, when my parents reached their diamond wedding anniversary, 60th anniversary a couple of years ago, we put something up about that. But generally speaking, when I put a post on Facebook, it's going to be one of three things. It's either going to be that I have uploaded some more videos onto YouTube, and I'll talk about why that in a minute. But and often, for example, when one of the consultants that I've been working with passes away, when I come to learn of this, then I will often put up onto YouTube the video that I made of them singing a song or telling a story as a tribute. And people like this, particularly family members, get in touch with me and say it's really nice to see our grandfather or our father or our mother on the YouTube, to see them again. Because in fact, it has been not so easy to return these videos to community members. And it seems as if putting things up on YouTube, I know there are issues with YouTube that we can discuss, but putting things up on YouTube is something that community members can immediately access, right? They can just click on it and it works. Whereas mostly with archives, they will, well, first of all, getting it up on the archive is somewhat more complex because either you have to have a particular file name or certain types of metadata that must be there. Now, I always put metadata onto my YouTube videos, but the metadata must be there in a particular way for the archives, and that is just a bit more time consuming. I'm doing that too, but it's just slow. But also often archives will require people to sign codes of conducts and so on. And well, most of these codes of conduct are not challenging in any way. Most people won't sign them. Like, they want this one-click access to the recording. So that's one thing that I do. But the other thing that I've used social media for is asking questions to the community about things that we need to be talking about. So one area recently we have, and we haven't yet actually announced this, but it should come out in the next week. We have working together with some people with expertise on the Dai script in Northeast India, but also with people in expertise in how Unicode works, how making keyboards, how font making works. A really beautiful new font has been made, which we're just about ready to release. But at certain stages along the way, we want to ask questions about, is this shape of this character the best one? Or how should it appear? Or these particular combination of characters, how should they appear? And for this, one can directly ask the community. I mean, this is something that in the past would have been really difficult to do. So I put up a post and say, this is what is currently in the font. What else does it need? And we can get a response that way. So, and then more specifically, I am having discussions with a range of different people about different aspects of linguistics and documentation. So I've got a couple of people who are interested in starting some kind of documentation program project on their language. And I'm slowly talking to them about, because they're asking me advice about what they should do, and slowly sort of, going bit by bit through that. And that we do by a Facebook discussion group. I have a colleague in Myanmar, in Burma, and he and I have been working for months, just slowly going through a dictionary, a sort of word list of about 1,500 words that he did an initial version of a couple of years ago. And we're just going through it and checking it, because this is a tone marked language and he has an orthography that marks tone. So we're checking that. And every Monday afternoon, my time, which is Monday lunchtime, his time, we talk by Facebook Messenger. I'm able to share the screen on my computer, make the Word document that I'm doing this with big enough so that he can see it on his mobile phone and he can check whether I've got the tone marks in correctly. We didn't do this yesterday because he's unwell at the moment. And of course, at the moment, being unwell in Myanmar is not a very good situation, but we are able to continue doing this. So these are some of the examples of the kinds of things that I'm doing. It's been less easy, though, to have the discussion with community members about the importance of documenting and recording. It's easier to ask questions about how do you translate this already recorded text. But I think you've had some discussion with some people in Northeast India about getting things archived with CoRSAL, which is, I think, a direction that I want to kind of promote. And I'll be talking to you more about this in coming weeks. So is that a helpful starting answer?
Yes, definitely. I mean, I think there's no one direction that we need to move in. I think it's sort of a new thing, really using social media in this way. And so I think it's just good to have an example from you having a lot of experience. And so I think it is great that you've kind of shared all of these different uses and also the different platforms that you're using, because Facebook can be polarizing. People are like, oh, don't go on Facebook. But then when you think about how many people really use it, then you have to meet people where they're at. And so I think it is a good example.
Yes. Thank you for making that point. Yes. Okay. So, look, I think we all know that Facebook contains a lot of utter nonsense. And it is being used as a tool to spread misinformation and lies and hate speech and all these sorts of things. There's no doubt about that. However, so I have around 4,700 Facebook friends, and I have to keep an eye on this because once you reach 5,000, you can't let new people in. And one of the problems with Facebook is that people keep adding new profiles and changing their names and so on. And I don't even know who most of my Facebook friends are. So most of these people live in India, a fair number live in Myanmar, in Burma, and the rest are, colleagues in linguistics and a few friends and family members and so on. So overwhelmingly, my Facebook friends are people in India who are associated with either one or other of the communities whose languages I've worked on, or who are associated, who are somehow involved in linguistics. So, students or faculty members of the various linguistics departments, people who attended the Northeast Linguistics Society, Northeast Indian Linguistics Society conference, etc. So I can, and of course it's tempting sometimes on a platform like Facebook to go into the stupid part of it where people are saying idiotic things and try and correct them. But it's ultimately fairly pointless because those people, let's not go even down that track. That's not even worth attempting to do. But it can be, but overwhelmingly what I am doing on Facebook is positive. So, thinking back to when I was doing my PhD thesis, my dissertation 25 years ago, at that time, the only way I could contact speakers of the language was by letter, by post. by what I think is sometimes called snail mail. And there was no certainty that letters would reach villages in India. And if they did, it might take a very long time for them to get back to me. So the only way of checking is, so you know, when you're writing that part of the dissertation and you've got one question about one particular thing, you just couldn't check on it, right? If the dissertation was being presented in 2 months' time and there was no chance to go back to the field and check on it, you couldn't. But now I can have a discussion with one of my colleagues. So we're together with one of my former PhD students, Kellen Parker Van Dam, we are moving towards writing a grammar of the Mershawng variety of Tangsa. Now, our main consultant there, Wanglong Mosang, who I think this will be a 3-authored book, although that is not without its implications, which I might get onto later. But this will be a book that all 3 of us are listed as authors on, I hope. But every time I have a question about something, I can send a message by Facebook to Wang Long and he will answer it. And sometimes we have these discussions. But this is by typing messages. We're not actually speaking. So I will write down, can you say this? Or how do you say, will you go to the field versus did you go to the field? Because it appears in this language that there is a person marked particle that is used specially for questions in the second and third person in the past tense. That's what I currently think the situation is. And so that's why I need to check, will you go to the field? Because that uses the usual, the person marker that would be found in an affirmative sentence. But did you go to the field uses a different one from the affirmative statement, you did go to the field. So, but this kind of discussion, I mean, I have to formulate the questions carefully, but we can have this by Facebook. Or with my colleague Kitung Hakun, and he and I and 2 musicologists, we are together writing a paper which will come out one day about a particular song that we recorded 15 years ago, but I found earlier in the year I could upload this to YouTube. He could listen to it, make a transcription and a translation, and then we have a regular meeting on Facebook to discuss the translation, and I can ask him questions and so on. So I would never have imagined 2 years ago that these things could occur, but they can. And I think, the other thing that you can do is to sort of form group discussions where it might be possible to actually talk about a range of things that you want community to discuss. So another area of interest that's going on is with regard to the Dai Ahom language, which is no longer a spoken language. And there's discussion in the community about how they will recover it, how they will revive it. And in particular, because it's a tonal language, how they will reinstitute tones into the language. So we're having a group discussion about, what is the way forward with something like that. Now, in terms of archiving, because I know that's what you're primarily interested in, and anyone that's listening to this at a time of day when I assure you I will be firmly sleeping, that in terms of archiving, I think one of the things I really want to move on is some collaborative projects to do, well, first of all, to get more community members recording traditional stories and songs and putting them into archives. And this is happening in some areas, but not yet, I think, as much as it could. And one particular area of interest that I have, which goes right back to the beginning of my research, is all the manuscripts that are in the Thai villages, the Thai Pake, Thai Aiton villages particularly, where they have large collections of manuscripts in village temples, but nowadays only really old people can read them and interpret them. And what we really need to do is to photograph the manuscript, record someone reading it in the traditional way, and record someone, that same person perhaps, explaining the meaning of it, line by line or section by section, and putting all this together into an archive. An enormous project. But, you know, it's going to be years before I can personally get back to the field. And in any case, I could never actually do something like this. So this is the kind of project that ultimately community members will themselves have to undertake. I can't see how it can be done. No academic institution, particularly now, is going to fund staff and students to do this kind of work. I mean, you couldn't ask someone to take this on as a PhD study because they'd have to spend so much time collecting and assembling the data, and what would they then have time to make a dissertation out of? So it's the kind of job that has to be led by community. And, you know, this is a very particular need because this is a community where the written language is much more endangered than the spoken language. And, you know, there's plenty of people who speak the language but could not interpret the manuscripts adequately. So, yeah, that's some other ideas for the future.
Yeah. Well, so it seems like, at least with that project that you're describing, it's something that you can really encourage from your point, but there's not, like, it can't be something that you're initiating. So, but the fact that Facebook kind of lets you stay in contact with people to continue that encouragement is kind of like, that is the benefit of it. But yeah, I think that at least that specific one would really be.
I've had some discussions. Right. I've had some discussions with a colleague who's living in Laos about this and about what it would involve. And we kind of started toying with the idea of talking to the community about it. But we didn't get to the point of doing it. So I discovered last year that I could do a lecture series, which I do on Zoom, but which I live stream to Facebook, and people listen, and then I put it up on YouTube afterwards. Mm-hmm. And I could talk about different aspects of my work, but also different aspects of the linguistic challenges. So one area that has come up over the last year is the issue of using the Unicode-based fonts that are being created for use for both the scripts that have been used traditionally for, in some cases, hundreds of years in the Thai languages that I researched, but also the Unicode fonts for the newly created scripts for the Wancho and for the Tangsa languages that have been created by people over there in the last 35 years. So the Tangsa script is a good example. So this was created by a really a farmer, the late Lakum Mosang, in 1990. And for 20 years, 25 years, well, 29 years actually, he promoted it, not always with a lot of support from anybody else. He promoted it and he taught his students, you know, in a very traditional handwritten way. Mm-hmm. But about 10 years ago, one of my former PhD students created the first font for it. And then I amended that slightly in discussion with Lakum Mosang. And then we moved towards, there was an initial proposal to Unicode to get it included in Unicode. Then in 2019, the community over there, a group of them decided to promote it, and they set up an organization. And fortunately, my last trip to India in February 2020, which was beautifully sandwiched between the crisis of December 2019 and the COVID crisis that followed it. But late January, early February 2020 was a perfect time to be in Northeast India. Absolutely everything working completely perfectly. And we, during that time, started producing a draft proposal to send to the Unicode Consortium to add this script to Unicode, and had a meeting in the community. So I got to see face-to-face not just the creator of the script and those who were promoting it, but also a number of other people from different communities who were part of this committee. And then the rest of the work, of course, has had to be done by internet. But I've been able to attend meetings of a group within that sort of vets Unicode proposals to discuss it, and those meetings happen in somewhere on the west coast of the United States on a Friday afternoon. So I get up on Saturday morning and attend. But I can also then contact the people in India, and for the discussion of the Tangsa script is more done through a WhatsApp group. So I've had to learn to do WhatsApp. It's not very hard, but so one of the things I guess I've learned from this is that whatever platform the community members want to talk to you on, that's the platform that you need to use. So getting back to your earlier point, people have concerns about Facebook. Yes, fine. But if you want to talk to these group of people who use Facebook, then you have to use Facebook too. And just ignore all the rubbish that's there, because there's a lot of good stuff happening there. Yeah.
Yeah, and I really agree. And I only bring up the negative just because I'm saying, like, exactly what you're saying. If that's what people are using, doesn't it make sense to just use that? I don't want, or I'd rather do the extra work myself than ask for somebody to learn some new platform to talk to me. And we've had with our kind of pilot testing this out, meeting people and discussing archiving through Facebook Messenger, then I think it has worked out okay. But yeah, and then WhatsApp is actually something I wanted to ask you about, because I can see just from the small amount that I've been able to travel in the northeast of India anyway, that it is really popular, and that's kind of how people are in contact with each other. But so I was going to ask what experiences you've had with WhatsApp and whether you think that that is kind of another thing.
Yeah. So with WhatsApp, so the first thing is, I'm of the age where texting is just way more difficult than typing on the keyboard. So I didn't grow up with texting on mobile phones, and well, there was no such thing when I was growing up. No chance of it, no sign of it. So, but I have discovered that you can, and it's not ideal, but you can do WhatsApp on your laptop. It has an annoying habit to require being updated all the time. And the way that I have found that I update WhatsApp on my laptop is that I have to uninstall it and reinstall it because it doesn't work otherwise. But I have managed to achieve that. WhatsApp and Facebook both are places where recordings can be sent to each other, right? So one very useful thing for either of these is that you can, I can, for example, cut a small section of a recording, send it to my consultant in whichever language I'm working on, and say, actually, what is this person saying here? Or what is this person singing here? Because the transcription says this, but I'm hearing something different. And they can respond back with their position on that. But WhatsApp seems to be, I think for some type of group discussions, it's possibly more useful. And I get a lot of, however, not everybody in WhatsApp groups or Facebook groups, for that matter, are on the same wavelength about what these groups are about. So you will get people posting their opinions about, recent events and so on, which is actually not if the purpose of the WhatsApp group is a particular language or a particular whatever. So But that's, I think I need to make sure that the other thing about social media, this is an important point. Most people regard social media as something where they want an immediate response. So if someone posts something up and you don't respond to it immediately, then it's probably not going to be noticed unless you're one of the first to respond to it. You know, I can send a question to someone, and if the answer is yes, they just say yes. Whereas if you send a question to someone by email, first of all, it takes longer, and secondly, you know, they're more likely to want to say more than just yes in the response. So in that sense, I think social media is not very, I don't know if people have written academic works about how researchers are using social media, but it seems to me that you use it in the way that it suits you to use it, and only do the part of it that you want to. Of course, you need to watch out on something like Facebook that somebody hasn't hacked into the account of the person you're talking to. But you'll know if that's the case because they'll start asking you for money, basically. And as soon as people start asking you for money, then you know that it's likely to be. Yeah. So, and then at that case, it can sometimes be necessary to block people, and you know, they usually become aware of it. But that hasn't been a major problem for me, I don't think.
Yeah, but using Facebook to stay in connection and kind of crowdsourcing answers from people who you've met them in the field already is the case with some of these people, right?
Well, yes. Now, but this does raise an interesting question, because you made the point you've met them in the field already. So, excuse me. So because I have been traveling back and forward to Northeast India for 25 years,
yeah,
then there's a lot of people who know me, and there's a lot of people that I know, but there's more people who know me than I know them. So if I say something on Facebook, it already has a certain amount of credit, if you like, because people know who I am. They know what I've been doing. I know I haven't achieved everything that I would have hoped to, but whoever does, and the task is just much bigger than any of us, I guess, imagine when we set out. But I think the thing that, so this gives me an advantage over, for example, a researcher who is beginning work, who does not have those personal contacts. So one of the issues that has come up is, can you build relationships with people that you haven't met by social media? And I think the answer to this is that yes, you can. So there is one, but possibly this is something that is going to be easier for younger people than it is for older. So there is one younger person in Northeast India who I don't believe I've ever met in person. However, he would know of my work, so that is, and my connections and involvements, and somehow we had become Facebook friends at some point. I don't know when.
It just happened.
It just happened, yeah. But during the last 6 months, in the process of producing the Thai font that we are hopefully just about ready to announce, he became the main person for giving advice to me as the sort of linguist with expertise in Thai language, but also to the font maker about the shapes of the letters and the different kinds of symbols that needed to be in the font. We had a brief divergence for several weeks because we thought there was an extra character in the older scripts, in these various manuscripts that Gensan was identifying, that we needed to include, that wasn't included in the Unicode standard, but then the font maker found it somewhere else and said we can use this. So we didn't have to go to Unicode to ask to add an extra character. which would have slowed down the creation of the font by a while. But this is a person that, we've had several meetings face-to-face by Zoom, and we have a lot of discussion over Facebook when we're, for example, testing the keyboard, testing the font, making sure that everything's working. So it's hard for me now to conceive that this is a person that I've never met face-to-face. So, and I think that in this modern era, there's a lot of languages around the world, and a lot of languages in the Northeast India area where people are keen to get linguistic work done, but you can't go and meet them face to face at the moment. And yet I think you could start building some contact with them. Now, didn't we have a discussion a few months ago with, and I'm not sure we've progressed this as much as we should, but with a young man who made some recordings at the Mall Festival in Northeast India, and about him trying to get those recordings archived on CoRSAL. I don't know if you've had further discussions with him since then, but I've never met him. So
okay. Oh, so we talked to him maybe sometime in June. That was when we started talking. And so for me, I had assumed, I said, oh, well, he must know him because I just know that you have traveled there a lot. So I thought, I'm sure they've met at some point. And so I'm the stranger in the conversation, and maybe it's kind of, we're all three semi-strangers, but we're clear about, our common goal in terms of, you made the introduction saying, this is Mary and she works for this place. And so kind of describing, what does CoRSAL do? And so, yes, I think it will be good we can pick up that conversation. That's me. I'm not on Facebook very much.
Well,
but,
yes.
It's very useful for making these contacts and keeping up with people, that you've met that are far away, but also, making new people who just by virtue of what you post, then I post about the Northeast, like just sharing other people's work and things like that. So it's a great way to get connected on the topics that people are both interested in and working on.
I'm not sure actually if I have met this person or not. He might have met me and I don't remember, but then other people. So I did, when I became aware of what he was doing, then I asked someone else that I do know about him. And this is, I think, another way forward, that, that we can use our existing networks, but in a social media way. Now, it would be nice to have a social media platform that everybody who is interested in language and who is interested in linguistics, we all felt equally comfortable using, and and therefore we were all on the same page, to use a metaphor. Well, we're never going to get to that stage because there will always be people in our field who don't want to use Facebook for all sorts of reasons, many of them quite good.
I think that there's a lot of reasons that it is very viable for making these connections and having those conversations. So I think it's the best that we've got for the moment. But before we finish, I did want to talk a little bit about YouTube. We had started with that one.
Yes.
And then, so you have posted a lot on YouTube, and then you'll post on Facebook, right? To then say, hey, everyone, I've uploaded some different videos. Yes. And so that's kind of, they're all coming together in that sense.
Yeah. So my aim is, and, I really only have my one main wish for the remainder of my life is that I live long enough to achieve this, which is to get everything that I have recorded properly archived, and all the translations that I have half done got to the point of being done as much as I can do them, and get all the videos and hopefully eventually also audio that I have recorded uploaded so that community members can access them easily. Now, archiving, as I mentioned before, archiving and YouTube, at the moment, my workflow is to do these two things together, right? So I'm not necessarily, so when I produce the metadata, so mostly at the moment I'm archiving through Paradisec, but I do also have a lot of material archived at ILAR, at the Endangered Languages Archive, and I need to follow up that, and also a lot of stuff on the Language Archive by the DOBES program. Now, but mostly currently the archiving that I'm doing is through Paradisec, which is local here in Australia, and the sort of support that I get offered is helpful there. Now, but at the same time, what I'm wanting to do is also to create, I want to create two other things. I want to create a folder at this stage on a hard drive, but where all the recordings from a particular language are all in the same place. Because at the moment they're archived all over the place. Some are in ILA, some are in the Language Archive, some are now in Paradisec for the same language. There's a historical reason for that. They have a multitude of different file names because of the requirements of the different archives and changes and things over the years. That's a whole other
story. The grants create a timeline too. So if a grant finishes and you have to archive that.
Yeah, exactly.
That's part of it too.
Exactly, yeah. Exactly. So, and archiving has turned out to be way more challenging and time-consuming than I could have possibly imagined. But anyway, I mean, I've done a lot, but I have also found that telling people about accessing one of the specialist archives just isn't getting the materials through to people. I mean, even if you can explain to them about, why you need to sign the code of conduct and how to do it, and this is not always straightforward for people in some of these communities, but okay, it can be done. But even if that's achieved, that just this sort of process of finding the recording in the archive can be quite challenging. Whereas the recordings that I have put up on YouTube, particularly if I post on YouTube that I have put up this particular recording. So I think one of the most recent ones was I came to know that one lady who had sung some songs a couple of years ago had passed away, and I put up a post on Facebook about her, put up the videos onto YouTube so that people could listen to them. And I think you or Shovana might have reposted it on your Facebook page about this. And then this will immediately lead to quite a few people listening to it. So I've got on my Tangshang Tangsa YouTube channel, I think there's around 500 people who have subscribed to it, which is starting to be a significant proportion of the speakers of this language, right? And, or this group of languages. And it's, the equivalent in English would be having, 3 million followers. And I mean, I'd be making money out of it if I had that number. So that is not, of course, the aim, but people are looking at these things. I mean, every so often I look at the numbers, and some of the videos that I've put up on there have had well over 1,000 views. Now, that doesn't mean that people have watched the thing in complete for 1,000 times, but it might mean that.
It's still really significant for a small group. I think that's huge.
Well, yeah.
I mean, putting on the internet, whether it's archiving or on YouTube, your goal is for people to see it, right? Yeah. And so what's really nice about what you're saying is that with YouTube anyway, you can see how many people have subscribed, how many views, and that's also not really part of any of these language archives. So with you're saying that you have
not as far as I know, no.
And in the Dobe archive, then you could never see, you could never know easily anyway.
So excuse me, at the moment, and I'm quite aware that this may change, but at the moment, what I'm viewing is that the archive is the place for long-term preservation, because I will not be here forever. And while I have all my recordings backed up on my university server and backed up on multiple hard drives here and blah and blah and blah. This is not good enough. The university could decide to get rid of me at any moment. We have a meeting in 23 hours where they're going to announce what further cuts they're making, and who knows, I might not be in a job this time tomorrow. I think I will be, but that's always possible. Secondly, these hard drives, they can crash at any second with no notice whatsoever. So of course you need to have something that is a long-term preservation tool, and that's what the archive is, in my view. The archive is the place of last resort where the thing is going to survive. It's the equivalent of sort of burying it under the sand in ancient Egypt, which was the best way of preserving things there. It survives for the longest period in the archives. Even those, of course, do not have protection beyond tens of years, but at least they are more likely to still exist in 100 years' time than any of my hard drives. But if the aim is to return materials to the community, then YouTube is clearly a much better option right at the moment. It's way easier to upload to, and like there's a minimum amount of information that you have to put in there. It does not have the same requirements as the archives. But that being said, one of the reasons why I haven't yet archived all the recordings I've done is that I take advantage of what YouTube does allow and make sure that I include in the information about the YouTube recording the date, the person or people who are speaking in there, what the content is, and if the content is transcribed and translated, then as much of that as can be fitted. YouTube has a 5,000 character limit on what you can put in. And so if it's a long document that's been translated in full, then it can't be there in full. But I sort of edit it and say a partial translation of this, because I would rather have some information connected to the YouTube recording just in case the archive doesn't exist. Because so I'm not just simply, like you'll often find when people put something up on YouTube that there's very little information there about what it is. But you'll find with mine that I am putting some of the basic metadata into it there, but I don't know, YouTube could change its policies at a moment's notice and just say, we're going to remove all these because no one's watching them, or we're going to remove all these because you're not paying us, or we're going to remove all these because we're no longer interested in this. I don't know what they might do, but so there is a sense in which YouTube, I understand the limitations of YouTube. It can't be the only thing that you do. But for returning materials to the community, this is hundreds of times more effective than copying things onto, so I've been right through from copying recordings onto cassettes, onto old, those little cassettes that
what the cassette is.
Audio cassettes.
Yeah.
Like, when, I must tell you this story, but back in 2000, one of my consultants told me about Dr. Bunchop, who had come to the village and made recordings in the 1970s. So I got in touch with her niece in Bangkok. I borrowed her recordings. Her niece loaned me her recordings. We brought them back to Australia. We had them digitized. I was asked at the time, do you want them digitized into WAV files or onto CD format? And I didn't know what to answer and made the wrong answer. Oh. So I said, put them onto CDs. I should have said, make them into WAV files. Later, we got them made into WAV files because I borrowed them a second time. But anyway, and then I took these back to the community and I played one of these CDs on my laptop, which was a laptop at that stage that had a CD player in it. This one doesn't.
Fancy. Very
yes, very old-fashioned. Played this CD to the people, and they said, we need to have a copy of this recording. And I said, well, on what? And they picked one of the cassettes that they had of, local popular Indian music and said, put it on here, wipe this off and put it on here. So we've got all the way from doing that through to making CDs for people, making DVDs for people, making DVDs that people could play on their TVs, then attaching things onto various types of portable hard drives and then copying things directly onto people's mobile phones. Done all of that in the past, but you can only do this for people like one by one.
Yeah.
YouTube, on the other hand, you can put it up there and everyone can see it.
Mm-hmm.
So this is way better in terms of returning materials to the community. And I don't believe that archives in the foreseeable future are going to provide something as easily made widespread as that.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's, you know, they're designed to keep it. And like you were talking about burying things under the sand, like they're not trying, an archive is not trying to have something hidden under the sand, but it's trying to preserve it. And that is one major priority. The second priority is access, but why can't that happen through both? You know, through it's on the archive and then it's happening on YouTube. And that interaction is 100 times more going to happen on YouTube, and you sharing it through Facebook to say, check out my YouTube, and then people will be interacting that way. So I completely agree. And, you know, you're saying the IT people are like, they're gonna delete all your stuff from YouTube, but it hasn't happened yet. And you have, you have plans for both in place. So I think that it's an approach that works. People are looking at it, so
people are looking at it. And like, I would never have expected that 1,000 people would ever be interested in anything that I did. So
yeah,
anyway,
but I think to me, that's like the biggest success. If there are people looking at it, then I think that that's something to be excited about. And so that's like a huge proponent for using social media to share these things because it's working. And I think anything that starts working, then we have to kind of follow that.